So I'm checking resistance, which is all over the place, between the starter solenoid end of the cable and the battery end of the cable. It's 1600 ohms, almost 1700 ohms. We'll put a new end on it and see what happens. I cut the end off the cable and stripped it back. And I don't know if you can see that green color on there. So we'll have to see if we can clean up that wire. And here's the cable after soaking for about half an hour in a vinegar and salt solution. And here is the new cable lug crimped on and the crimpers that were used to install it. And here is the ohm meter reporting 0.1 ohms resistance with the new terminal on. Well, here we go for, what is this, round 3? Anyway, I think we actually found an issue this time. The ground lug, the lug on the cable on the battery end was corroded and not making contact, at least not according to our ohm meter. So we've replaced that. I cleaned the end of the cable using a vinegar and salt solution, using a tip I found on the good old internet, until it was much cleaner than it was when I started. And I crimped this lug on. It's for number 6 cable with a 1/4-inch hole, and I use 1/4-inch bolts to hold the battery cables on, so that should work fine. Now, I did find on this cable a small spot right here where there's a green spot visible through the insulation. So I'm going to cover that with a piece of heat shrink tubing, because again, this is the battery cable that goes directly to the battery, and we don't want that shorting out. It will cause a dead short and cause a large issue because there's no fuse to protect anything. So I'm just going to shrink this heat shrink tubing. So our heat shrink is shrunk, and this is double walled stuff, and there's a sealer in it, so that should be well sealed. So we can install that cable. Now I put the hardware back in here. Take the screw and the lock washer, flat washer out. This heat shrink, of course, will still be warm. Screw back through the little ferrule and through the other cable. Try not to drop the screw. Okay, well, our screw and washers got away from us. Okay, so we'll make sure it's through the cable and this ferrule and the cable, the battery cable that goes to the dash, the one we put the new fuel solder on. Start this by hand so it doesn't get away from me again. Tighten the screw down, make sure nothing's touching anything that shouldn't. Okay. Our insulating sleeve. There, now this cable has to go through the grommet here. And I think we will want it under these cables. Two of the Dynastart cables. That heat shrink is right where the grommet is. So the grommet may not fit that just right. We're going to make it work. Okay, so that's the cable installed. Now I'm going to put the cover on here. Arm. Grommets are in the cover properly here. I just have the one screw, the other one was wrong, so I'm not going to put another wrong screw in it. I'll leave a screw out of the more or less exposed side here until I have the correct one. Okay. So now we'll set this back in. Now with the positive battery cable on, we can thread the cable back through the hole beside the engine here. It goes again through the air duct underneath the driver's seat. Cover is on as well as it's going to. Slide it back in the hole. Oh, it's going to go back in the hole. Okay. Again, we've got choke and throttle cables and clutch cable here all competing for space. Set that in, and I'll reach in. I'll have to reach in later. I was going to reach in and pull that positive cable through, but the battery's in the way and all, so I'll have to disconnect it to pull the battery. Sorry, I'll have to take the ground cable off the battery and pull the battery out so I can reach in the hole. Okay, so now these are the wires that go to the dash. Start it through the right spot. It's tight in here because of the way the Penguin is made, and also there must be a strap with some screws holding this makeshift fuel tank in position, because there's some screws sticking through here that have been cut off and they're pretty sharp. All our wires back out here for this connector. Again. And I've got them on the wrong side of the spark plug wire. Under the spark plug wire, give me a little more length, because they no more than just reach where they have to go. So now I'm pretty sure we're on the right track here. We actually found an issue that fuse holder coming apart on the cable, of course, was an issue, but I don't think it was our cause of our no start. Of our, well, our not, the condition where it wouldn't crank. Okay, so you can't see it from there, but I'm just going to do this again the way I did it before. Black to black. Brown to brown. Make sure the connectors, the bullets are pushed in as far as they can go into the block here. And blue to blue. We're going to be one wire short. We're going to be short the yellow wire for the neutral indicator. That is still in the cover. The points. We have to clean the points and put the cover back on. Okay, now red to red is obvious. And we have a gray wire to go to a yellow wire. And then we have a yellow wire to go to a white wire. Okay, so there are the 5 wires we have connected up. So now I'm just going to disconnect the negative terminal, the negative cable on the battery, so I can pull the battery out and pull the positive battery cable through into place. Okay, so what you couldn't see was me disconnecting the negative cable from the battery so I could pull the battery out of the battery box, reach in underneath the driver's seat and fish out the positive battery cable. Then I set the battery back in, connected the positive cable, touched the negative cable to the battery just to see if there was a spark, which would indicate a short circuit or I left a key on or something, and there was no spark, so everything looks good to go. So we'll turn the key on. We have a generator light, which we didn't have consistently before, and we'll turn the key to start. Okay, so that's cranking over forward. Flip the switch here. And now it's cranking over in reverse. Don't have a lot of battery power there, but you know, the engine is cranking over forward and reverse now. So now our next mission is to take this side cover, take this cover off, and get out the points that we can't see because they're on the other side of this plate. And we'll clean in here while we're at it. And then we should be, hopefully, hearing this engine run. So we'll be back when I get set up for that. The next step in getting our Penguin engine running is to check and clean the ignition points. Ignition points are under this, the points cover on the right hand side cover. And before we take this cover off and go at the points, I'm going to clean this up a little bit. It's got some rust and dust and oily goop on it. I'm simply going to use some of my favorite penetrating oil here and some shop towels and just wipe it off to clean it up a little bit, and then we'll come back and take this cover off and go at the points. After a few minutes with a nylon brush, a brass bristled brush, blue shop towel, and my favorite penetrating oil, the cover is cleaner. Maybe not perfectly clean yet. Still some more on it. It could come off, but the inside is, all the dust I think is out of there anyway. So Now we'll have a go at cleaning the points. Don't need those brushes. Okay, so our tools we're going to use here, we're going to use a screwdriver that fits these two screws. I have another small flat bladed screwdriver here I may use, a pair of needle nose pliers. I have a jeweler's screwdriver. I have the lid off my penetrating one. I have a Dremel motor tool here with a small brush on it, and something I made up to actually to check and set the ignition timing. I took a LED clearance light, hooked it up to a 9-volt battery and a set of alligator clips, so you can use it for checking continuity in a unpowered circuit. So when the alligator clips are touched together, or you put it in a circuit that's complete, of course the light comes on. So just to check here, these two wires are the wires that go to the points, and because the cover is off of the engine, the points should be closed, and when they're closed, they're connected to ground. So if I connect one of my alligator clips to the case, which would be ground, and connect our other to one of the points wires, the light comes on, but it's not very bright. Compared to, there's ground, and there's the wire to the points. So the points are making contact, but they're not making very good contact. So that's one set, and the other set again is making contact, but I'm pretty sure they're dirty. There's no point in putting them back on the engine only to find out it's got no spark, and then having to take this off and do it again. Sorry, taking the cover off again and having to do this later. So might as well do it now. We'll take our side cover off. There's two screws here. Screws off, the cover simply lifts off, and there is a gasket, or the remainder of a gasket here. I could replace that gasket if this was on a motorcycle where it was out exposed to the weather. I'd be concerned about that gasket, but maybe I should be because there's been moisture get in here. But I'm just going to clean that old gasket off there and not use any gasket at all on this. I'll take my brass bristled brush and just clean the rest of this off here. But what we're focusing on here is the ignition points. Now, we have two sets of ignition points. One here, one here. And we can maybe see that this set here is pretty green, and this set's greenish too, so they're dirty and they're not making contact. Now, the reason I clean these up in the cover is because if you take them out and put them back in, then they have to be adjusted. They have to be adjusted for the proper clearance. When the ignition cam pushes them as far open as it can, you want to measure the gap and set that gap according to specification in the manual, whatever that is. And what that does is it makes sure that the ignition points are actually closed the right amount. And they have to be closed the right amount for what is referred to as dwell, the amount of crankshaft rotation in degrees that the ignition points stay closed. So So the points would have to be set to they would have to be gapped at their maximum, and they would also have to be set to open at just the right moment. And that moment, I believe, in the manual is when the piston is 11/64 of an inch before top dead center. And to check that, you either need a dial indicator that has an adapter to go through the spark plug hole, or you need to take the cylinder head off and use a dial indicator. But I'm going to avoid all that. This engine was running when it was last used and before it sat, and I'm going to just remove this movable contact and this removable contact. I'll probably remove them at the same time. Then I'm going to polish the contact surfaces with my motor tool, and that will remove very little, if any, material. So it will disturb the setting. It will change the setting actually very little, if at all. So if the engine ran well before it sat, I shouldn't be disturbing the ignition gap or the ignition timing by cleaning the points this way. So what we don't want to disturb is this large screw here that holds the points, the set of points into this cover, and that small screw is an adjuster. If you loosen that larger screw a little and then turn the smaller screw, the head on it is offset, and it will actually move the movable contact in and out to adjust the gap. Okay, so on here we have a brass post that the points pivot on, and holding those points onto that brass post is an E-clip on each one, and there's maybe 2 washers under each one of those E-clips. So I'm going to carefully, with my jeweler screwdriver, remove the E-clip, making sure it doesn't spring off. Okay, so there's the E-clip. There's 2 washers, if you can see them there. There were 2 washers there. So I'll take this other E-clip off, and we'll take the washers off here. Again, there are 2 washers. So now, on the movable contact, there is a spring which does 2 things. It closes the movable point, the movable contact, and after, when the lobe of the cam goes by, and it also is used to connect the movable contact to the wire. So we have to remove the end of that spring. There's an insulator on it, because when this contact is open, it's not touching anything. It's not touching ground. It's not electrically connected to ground, because there's an insulated sleeve here and there's an insulator on the spring. So we want to gently pry the insulator out of the arm here, of the bracket for the stationary contact. And you can see, so this is pulled out of position, and this is still in position. So then we can carefully move this up off the post and out where we can get at it. Now, so if we take a look, that movable contact is dirty, corroded, etc. So that's why it was not making very good contact. It's interesting it was making any contact at all, the way that surface looks. Okay, so now we'll remove this other pad there and raise this up and pull it out where we can get at it. Now, there are washers below on this pin here. I'm not going to turn this over so that we don't lose them. Now we'll get some power to our polishing tool here. So I'm going to clean this contact here, this contact here, this one here, and this one here. Now I should be able to get in with the brush, with the motor tool turned on of course, and polish them. And something I want to do as I'm doing this is try to avoid touching those with my fingers, because any grease that's on my finger will attract dust, and it only takes one little piece of grit to get between the two contacts, and they don't make electrical contact, and you've got no spark again. So I'm going to just go at this and clean these up. Okay, so I think I've got them polished pretty clean here. Let's just take a look. That looks more like a metal pad and not a corroded lump. Okay, now to put these back in position, again I'm going to try to avoid touching the contact surfaces. So here we can see the movable arm, the insulated pivot, the spring, the insulator, and the wire. So I want to put these back on. I'm just going to start it on the pivot pin. Then I have to squeeze the contact together so it slides down into place. Now the insulator is in place. Just gently push that in there like that. Do that with this one too as well. Again, trying not to put my greasy meat hooks on those nice clean contacts. Okay, so start it on the pin, squeeze it into place. Use a screwdriver, push the insulator gently, there, in place. Now, there are washers and E-clips to go back on, but just going to do a quick look here with our test light. Now that's much better contact. We could actually test it with an ohm meter if we wanted to. That's interesting. That contact set isn't making contact for some reason. So that, I'll put that where you can see it. That would be this set here. So that's the red wire with the black tracer, which is there. So just check to make sure. Yeah, we've got I'm on the right contact point there, because I'm going from the wire's here. There's a movable contact. So it's making contact there and touches to the ground. And even though it is closed, it's not making electrical contact. Of course, nothing else I touch will make that light up. So I'm going to take that out and spend another moment with the brush, with the wire brush. Okay, now put that back in place, test it again. Ease it in, seat the insulator into the spring. So we ground this. And that's the set that we had working already. And there is the one we just cleaned again. So I'm going to try a piece of paper. I'm not getting contact. Well, I'm going to try touching our, just make sure our bracket is making contact with ground here. Yeah, our stationary contact is connected to ground. And check again from the wire to the stationary movable contact. It's connected, but it's just not making contact across that set of points. Or whatever. There may be a coating on that contact that the wire brush just won't remove, but take this out again. Normally I touch with the brush, the wire brush on the Dremel tool, and everything's good, but that's because I'm demonstrating this. We've got to have something go wrong. Just scratching it with the jeweler's screwdriver here to see if there's anything on there that the wire brush isn't touching. We'll give it another shot with the wire brush here. Take our light over there. We don't need that. Gotta make sure I'm getting all of that contact surface clean, because if I leave a bit of dirt on one spot, it will defeat the whole purpose of cleaning it. Back in, I could check it electrically without seeing this insulator, but the end of the spring here, but one more time. So that's the red with black. Okay. So now between the red and black, red wire with the black tracer and ground, we have connection. And if I open this point, there we go. So that set of points is clean. Connect our test light to the other wire, and that's this contact point, and that is making contact. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So before we put the cover back on, so we're going to take our two small washers, put them on. Get our keeping those pliers handy here. Put the E-clip on, try not to drop it. That E-clip is in its groove. Not sure how serious it would be if the E-clip wasn't there. The contact is kind of held in position by the spring, but I guess without these washers and the E-clip, it could move up and down on this pin here. There. So the E-clips are on, the two washers are under each one, and I just checked to make sure I didn't forget the washers, but the washers are on, the E-clips are on. Just check it one more time here. So ground to put the battery on our test light here. So that's the black with the red tracer. This set. Looks okay, and the red with the black tracer. Sorry, alligator clip will stay where I put it. There's our reluctant set of points now clean. So those are clean. Disconnect my test light so the battery doesn't go dead. I'm just going to clean this cover quickly. Now, in here there is an oiling pad. This should have a little bit of oil put on it to lube the cam so that the rubbing blocks on these points are lubricated. So I'm going to I'll do that before I put the cover on, before I put this cover on, but for now I'm just going to put the cover over these points. You can get a new gasket for that cover, no problem. I just I'm not going to put one on this engine. Put those 2 screws in. We also have our neutral indicator wire here. We can just look and make sure there are no bare spots or anything on it. There's a knot in it to keep it from being pulled through the cover. So that will have to be connected to the neutral indicator contact on the transmission when we put this back in place. So there. That's our points cleaned and our right hand side cover ready to reinstall.